This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Hustro.com, a leading construction management software tool.
Brilliant. So as you said to me in the pre-chat, you are an Aussie that went to New Zealand. So talk us around the sensitivity of that move.
I have to be very careful to say Australian by birth and Kiwi by choice. And part of that decision was just sort of, it's rather well known that mining is doing well in Western Australia. That's where I'm from. And I was just in a bit of a lull after coming out of one of the biggest projects that Western Australia's ever had, the Gorgon project on Barrow Island. And thought, I worked with a lot of Kiwi colleagues, worked with a lot of Irish colleagues as well, and thought, okay, well, let's check out New Zealand, and found a country that was, and I mean this with in the best possible way, but they were lagging in the safety space behind Australia quite a bit. So there's an opportunity to make a difference there, and also test some things that I'd been thinking about, some theories.
Hello, everybody. Gavin Coyle. I'm the Gaffer, back again, and I have a guest all the way from New Zealand with a topic that is close to my own heart. If anyone listens to the podcast regularly, you would know health and safety is my own background. So please don't turn off or don't tune out, because this is a quite interesting topic, especially for yourself if you're running a business, regardless of whether it's small, medium or large. We all need to talk about what happens in case of an accident. How prepared are you, or are your company, are they prepared? Have you done some sort of a crisis management plan? How does your leaders react in the case of an accident? So for example, somebody rings up from the local newspaper and says, I hear that somebody has died on your site. How are you going to deal with that information? Or how does your foremen or project managers deal with that information? It's something that we would regularly check with our own clients, just to see, because everybody responds in their own individual way, and you never really know exactly how people are going to respond until actually the trauma actually hits them smack in the face. Desai Link wrote a book on this as well. It's called Beyond the Incident. We'll put it in the show notes at the end of the call. You can download it there. Really good topic, really interested. Des, welcome to the show. Delighted to have you on I'm the Gaffer.
Thanks very much, Gavin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Where do we start? You're group safety manager for a large construction company, but you have a broad background in health and safety. How long are you doing safety at this point?
I've been in safety for about 15 years, and I've been lucky enough to work across industries. So I started in transport, and moved then to oil and gas and hospitality, and now in construction.
Brilliant. So as you said to me in the pre-chat, you are an Aussie that went to New Zealand. So talk us around the sensitivity of that move.
I have to be very careful to say Australian by birth and Kiwi by choice. And part of that decision was just sort of, it's rather well known that mining is doing well in Western Australia. That's where I'm from. And I was just in a bit of a lull after coming out of one of the biggest projects that Western Australia's ever had, the Gorgon project on Barrow Island. And thought, I worked with a lot of Kiwi colleagues, worked with a lot of Irish colleagues as well, and thought, okay, well, let's check out New Zealand, and found a country that was, and I mean this with in the best possible way, but they were lagging in the safety space behind Australia quite a bit. So there's an opportunity to make a difference there, and also test some things that I'd been thinking about, some theories.
Yeah, and you have a background in law as well. Was that right to say?
Yeah, so I studied law. I was admitted to the West Australian Supreme Court Bar in 2010. And if you're wondering how I transitioned from law to safety, law wasn't for me. I wasn't someone who wanted to get into the courtroom and burn the other side. I wanted to help people. And I found that I was driving forklifts while I was studying, and found that I actually really enjoyed that, and I wanted to help people in the workplace. And so safety was kind of a natural transition for me.
Well done. Yeah, because I studied a bit of law myself, and I think there's a niche well, there's a couple of legal guys I know that specialize in safety, but there's not that many.
Not many at all. And a lot of the thinking from law hasn't come across to safety as well. I don't know if you've noticed that, but
No, talk to me
sometimes
about
the
that.
way we approach safety risk, and I might be getting technical here, but we don't tend to consider legal risk in some of the things that we do.
Talk to me about that.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, talk to me about that. What expand on that a bit further, if you don't mind.
Well, just to give an example, quite a common one that I think most people could relate to. Safety is known for having lots of paperwork. It's always associated with filling out forms, checklists, doing TAs and swims and all that, SOPs, that type of thing. And it's very paperwork heavy. Now, some people do that with a view to, cover their butt if the regulator gets involved or there's something goes wrong. But sometimes that paperwork can actually be what's used against you. And so people in generating this paperwork are actually generating a rod for their own back. And it's something that's just not normally considered. But coming from law into safety, it was a little bit more obvious that that's what's going on.
But is it not better to have the paperwork anyway, and sort of deal with the consequences then afterwards? And usually where I see the issue with it is that it's very easy to turn around after the fact and say that the risk assessment wasn't adequate, because that's what generally comes out of these investigations, is that you failed to have an adequate risk assessment, even though you had the risk assessment. And that's what bugs me about the whole legal system, is what is adequate, and how do we train people to have adequate risk assessments?
And with the benefit of hindsight, it's always easier to answer that question well after the fact.
Well, everybody's the general after the war.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what and in fairness, that's what gives safety a bad name, is that, so for the best will in the world, the safety guy is trying to do the best person, trying to do the best thing for the company and have all the paperwork done. And still, yet, when there's an incident, there's still fault thrown at the company. Yeah. And if they don't find it because it's not obvious, it goes back to, well, your risk assessment didn't pick it up, so therefore it was inadequate.
Yeah. And I think that's a genuine concern for any business, and especially in high-risk industry, is you're probably going to be faced with a serious incident, and you need that assurance that you're doing the right thing. And it's very hard to get that assurance. And I've noticed that it's been particularly difficult in New Zealand the safety industry is still developing. It is there. There's a lot of passionate, enthusiastic people, but it is still, it's got a bit of a journey. They have 4 times the amount of fatalities per capita than the United Kingdom.
New Zealand?
To put it into perspective, yeah. It's pretty bad.
In construction, obviously?
No, it's across the board.
Okay. Wow. 4 times for such a small population.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And obviously construction is one of the industries that score highest in that metric, which is pretty sad. But forestry, agriculture, they're also way up there as well.
So what are you following? I don't want to get too technical, but in terms of the legislation, do you guys not, like, if there's a lack of legislation for a particular topic, for example, would you then say, well, in Ireland and in the UK, it's the case that, well, if you don't have the piece of legislation that governs that particular topic, you look at the nearest standard or the nearest legislation closest to you that would, solve that issue. So we would look at the UK, for example. I'm based in Ireland, or the UK have looked at Ireland as well. So how do you guys sit with that?
It's more or less exactly the same. So typically we would look across the Tasman to Australia to standards. Sometimes they're a bit more
advanced.
There's a bit more to choose from, because Australia is 7 different jurisdictions. Each state has its own safety legislation. So you can look at what the courts have learned through case law. You can look at the standards and regulators' publications. And it's quite a rich resource. We do also refer to the United Kingdom, sometimes Canada as well. WorkSafe BC has some great resources.
Yeah.
But a lot of people lack the expertise, and a lot of businesses lack the access to expertise to go and check that out.
Do you still define competency in New Zealand as the person with the relevant qualification, experience, knowledge, and technical, experience in order to do the job, or have you got competency defined in New Zealand?
Well, it's different in different contexts, but competency generally is pretty hard to find in New Zealand, and that sounds like a pretty awful thing to say about a whole country, but there is a general lack of deep sort of expertise in the country, and I say that because a lot of the time when you have that expertise, you can fetch more dollars overseas, and that sends everyone typically over to Australia. The mining industry's got a lot of money; they tend to attract that kind of expertise, which leaves a dearth of expertise, for medium-sized businesses in New Zealand, and it's a real concern, I think.
You're losing people to other industries and other countries, because it's a race to who's going to get the best talent out there. But just to reverse back that, what I was saying is competency defined in your legislation, in your statute books? What is the definition of competency?
It depends on the context. Typically, it's a combination of training and practical experience.
Okay.
But when it comes to roles like mine, there is no legislated definition. There's nothing
Really?
official. There's a professional association which has its own definition, but there's no requirement that people come from a professional association or even be involved with one. You can happily put your hand up and say, yeah, I'm a safety expert.
You are joking me.
I'm not. I wish I was, but I'm not. It's pretty sad. Yeah.
So anybody can be a safety officer in New Zealand as long as they maybe join that association, and I'd suggest that association wouldn't be a high barrier to entry, if you don't mind me saying so.
They don't even need to join the association, but the association does some great work. I don't want to denigrate that, but it's not regulated in any way.
I'm sorry to say this, and you have a problem with a shortage of labour of safety in New Zealand. I think there's a Boeing 747 on its way of a load of people heading for New Zealand to start off as their health and safety ground. The people that say to me, Gavin, it's ridiculous. I want to get into health and safety, and it's, everybody's saying that, you need to have experience, and I can't get the experience because nobody will take me on because, it's just too much time and effort. And you're telling me that you can just basically go romp in and go, here we go. What about the unions? Is there a strong union in New Zealand in terms of managing the sites? Or
no, they are present, but they're just not prominent.
So, and in other ways, some countries nearly use the union card as the safety card. So the union rep is nearly the safety rep as well. Does that happen in New Zealand?
In New Zealand, I haven't seen that. It's not to say it doesn't happen. Australia, it does happen, but it's not. It differs from state to state, and it's in some organisations and in some states it's more prominent than in other places. But certainly does happen in New Zealand. Very different story.
Wow. Right, let's get into the nuts and crannies of an accident, because I was just getting nerdy on that. So apologies to everybody for maybe sidetracking. In the case of an accident, you wrote the book and stuff like that. What led you to write the book in the first place, Des?
Coming from law, I had into safety. It was kind of immediately apparent to me that safety professionals, safety practitioners haven't brought or learned anything from law. And what I mean by that is the way we approach incident investigations is very formalized, but it doesn't go much deeper than that. If some of your listeners might be familiar with root cause analysis, ICAM, these types of tools, they're great tools in their own right, but there's all these learnings from law which can be applied to an investigation to make it more effective and more efficient. And I can give you an example of what I mean by that. We had an incident in New Zealand construction where a carpenter had taken a skill saw and almost taken off his thumb with it. It kicked back and the movement cut quite deep into his thumb. Now, typically an investigation would look at the process, the correct process for doing that. He hadn't clamped down the timber. He was holding the timber with his other hand. And any operator's manual would tell you that's not how it's done. Any SOP would tell you that that's not how it's done. And that would typically conclude the investigation as that this person has not followed the procedure. But by digging a bit deeper, asking a few more questions and bringing some of that stuff from law, we actually found out that, okay, well, why was this person not doing it in that particular way? Did they not have the tools available to them? Did they not have the knowledge despite them being a carpenter? And when we started asking questions, we dug a bit deeper and found that they weren't actually a carpenter. The dates on their resume and their reference letters when we recruited them didn't match up. And we recruited this person from overseas. And we found that the overseas agent that was recruiting these people and sending them to us was actually fraudulently putting together their documents. So it's just taking whoever walked through the door, calling them a carpenter and sending them off to us.
Wow.
So by applying some of those sort of principles and tools from law, we were able to dig a bit deeper and find, a sort of a much bigger, in my mind, much more interesting problem to solve than what was immediately
negligence
apparent.
problem. It was negligence.
That was fraud, I would say. Yeah.
Fraud. Yeah. So how does the, like, in terms of the book, the connection between that and that?
The book talks about evidence and the way law views evidence. And I know this sounds, like it's going to be buried in legalese. It's not. It's really easy to understand. It's some simple concepts. So the way evidence is treated in law, we treat evidence in a safety investigation in a similar way. And law also has a series of causation principles, which again sounds like complex legal nonsense. It's not. It's just a way of looking at things to determine what caused what. And by applying that to a safety investigation, we were able to look a lot deeper and a lot further.
Wow. So basically what you're saying is there's a broader view to looking at an accident and incident investigation than just root cause analysis in terms of the standard root cause analysis that we all use, or any safety professional would use, or any employer would generally use.
I think so. I think, yeah, like an incident is an unfortunate thing, but it's also a fantastic opportunity to learn and improve and make some sort of genuine inquiry into what happened. And it's actually a great opportunity. And if you can take that RCA process, that learning process, and enhance it with a bunch of tools, which I've tried to outline in my book, it's only going to improve that opportunity to learn. And you're going to really dig and discover some things that are going to be very interesting for you.
Yeah. So let's go back to the my analogy at the start of the show, where the Sun newspaper of New Zealand rings up so-and-so scaffolding company and says, "I believe one of your scaffolders died on a job today." Like, what does that conversation look like, or should look like, in terms of educating your front line to deal with crisis management, in your mind?
If I were taking that call, my first concern is always for the people. And I would be making sure that the people involved or connected to it, so that includes the family, the co-workers, possibly even the site where it happened. There might be some other people there that are affected by it. So we're talking about medical assistance, trauma, counselling, that sort of thing. I would rally around those people and provide them with what they needed. The next thing I would concern myself, once I knew that was happening well, would be notifications. And what I mean by that is who knows about it and who needs to know about it. And there's a few aspects to that. So given if it's a fatality, you're probably going to want to speak to your legal counsel, your insurers, your safety team. You're going to need to report that up to your board if you have a board, or some sort of senior leadership. And when I say I'm looking after the people first, this might be within a 20-minute window that I'm doing all of these things and taking those first steps. And it's really, the people should always come first. And then it's a case of who needs to know and who knows. So part of who knows is controlling the narrative of what actually happened, because the rumor mill can spin away. And, especially if the media is involved, it can actually do a lot of damage, not just reputational damage, but when the story is something other than what happened, it's not benefiting anyone to have that. So you do need to control that narrative to some extent. So I don't know if that's answered your question very well, but that's how I would approach that situation.
Are you looking to spend less time on paperwork and more time making things happen on site? Hustro.com is the simplest construction management software out there. Streamline inspections, defect reporting, and all your project documentation all in one app. With Hustro.com, contractors are seeing 75% less time on inspections and reports, 47% faster corrective actions, and almost a third quicker decision making. Hustro.com is the simplest software to manage construction projects, period. Level up your site efficiency today with Hustro.com.
No, it's interesting because we use scenario-based crisis management drills with some of our own clients, and we would ask that question, and a lot of the foremen that we speak to would say, "Well, I'd put them in touch with the safety department," and it's not the right answer. We would say, like, you don't have to have a PR company. It's nice to have a PR company to get ahead of the narrative, but you should have a holding statement, and especially with AI, you can simply put into an AI function how to respond to an accident from a PR perspective, and write me a holding statement. So, it doesn't matter whether you're small, medium, or large. You should have a holding statement that stops the narrative going out into the public. Because if you're working on public projects, for example, a school or something like that, and you have a major incident like that's, even though you think you're a small contractor, that's going to make big news, and you want to get ahead of that narrative. And I appreciate what you're saying as well. But that holding statement we found as being very, very critical in terms of your pack, and that allows you to sort of give you a bit of breathing space to say, look, we don't know exactly what happened here. We're on it, but you're going to have to give us time. And that's the other part of the second part of it that we see, is that clients get very stressed for obvious reasons, and they're saying, we want, and in the case of principal contractors or main contractors, they're hammering the door going, we want a report on the table tomorrow morning about what happened here. We don't know. So how the hell are you coming in here banging the drum? And we see it with small contractors. They come back and go, oh, your man wants it now, your man wants it now. It's like, no, you're not getting it. I'll give you a preliminary report, which is similar to my holding statement, that says, well, we're looking into it, but initially it looks like this, but we don't know for sure. So, here's a preliminary accident investigation.
I like that example because in the first instance, you said a fatality, and there definitely should be some sort of a plan in place to responding to that. But most of the incidents that we deal with don't involve the media. They don't involve the regulator or external stakeholders sometimes at all. But they're serious enough in their own right. The thumb incident is a good example of what we're dealing with, that the media wouldn't be involved in that. But there's still good value in investigating that and understanding it, and taking the time to understand it. And it does take time, and generating a report, within minutes of the incident happening is just completely unrealistic. And I agree with you, like a preliminary report is probably the best you can do, and just say, hey, this is what we know at this point in time. But a good investigation takes time, and any incident deserves a good investigation. And so it deserves the time that it takes to make some decent inquiries, get some decent learnings, and make some decent improvements.
I agree 100%. So in terms of any other lessons learned within the book or case studies or any sort of examples, have you got anything else that you can share with us in the accident?
Look, I'll say something general. The idea that, you've got to sit down and have a formal investigation and make it this big process is a little bit misleading. Some incidents will demand a very formal response, and some stakeholders will demand that. And we talked about principal contractors, but sometimes it doesn't need to be that formal. And you can learn a lot just from sitting down and having a conversation with the people that were involved. And that can just be at a cafe over a cup of coffee, and just say, hey, just tell me the story of what happened. Start wherever you want to start and just tell me, and I'm listening. And let people talk, and you'll be surprised what you can find. And the book talks about techniques for asking those questions, but it's really just about putting the person at ease so that they feel comfortable talking about it. It's just gently nudging them with questions just to understand it a bit better. It's really not complicated stuff, but it's worth taking that effort just to have that conversation, just to gain a little bit more understanding.
Talk to me about your approach, and this might be a personal approach, and that's why I'm asking you the question. But talk to me about your approach for paying people when they're off with maybe just a bruise, or could be a week or two that they need time off. Take your legal hat off, but give me what you think an employer should do in terms of pay or don't pay the person.
It's going to be difficult for me to take my legal hat off because it's so ingrained in the system here. New Zealand is unique because for workers' compensation, but I don't think you're really talking about workers' compensation.
No.
You're just talking about giving people time off.
Yeah, this usual crack of, well,
yeah,
I'll pay him for a few days because it's only, look, what is it? It's not, and at the end of the day, the mortgage is more important than anything else, or the loans that the guy has or she has, whatever,
Yeah, I would say that I don't have any problem with an organization paying people in that context. What I would hesitate to do is to lose contact with them. So if you're paying them to sit at home and mull about the house and dwell on their thoughts, I probably wouldn't recommend that. I'd say you still want to stay connected to that person, keep them engaged, help them continue with their purpose, and even if that purpose is just getting up in the morning and going to work and being connected with society in that way and their culture, that's important. And I've seen people decline pretty quickly when they're not connected with their place of employment, because that is their connection with the world. And when they're stuck at home on the couch watching daytime TV for too long, it really does start to eat away at them. So paying them, not an issue, but stay connected.
So we see a lot of companies using the light duties as an angle that, well, he's not off work or she's not off work because they're on light duties, which is an alternative to their normal task. And therefore, there is a certain number of days in the UK and Ireland that you have when the person is off work. And if they're out past those days, then it becomes notifiable to the Health and Safety Authority of the country. I'm not sure how it is in New Zealand, but we would have seen that people would have been light duties, so that in effect they weren't actually out of work. So you didn't have to report it to the authority. So therefore, you don't have a blemish on your statistics. Talk to me about that.
I have no doubt that happens it definitely happened in Australia. It's probably a little bit less so in New Zealand because the system's a bit different here. The workers' compensation insurer is nationalised, and so it's a little bit different, but it does still happen, that sort of thing. People want to avoid the statistics. They want to avoid notifying the regulator. So they're popping people on light duties. And I would say that that's bad. It's on the face of it, it's not an awful thing to do, but because the motivation's wrong. However, if the motivation is to keep the person connected to their workplace, keep them engaged, then light duties, alternate duties, whatever you want to call it, is actually a really positive thing. And just so long as it's within their medical capacity. I think there's a lot of research to support that. I can't quote it at the moment, but I've seen that work in practice, that keeping them engaged, keeping them connected with their work is a positive. So I would actually encourage it from that perspective.
Yeah, and I'll second that, because in those cases, in a lot of those cases that I've seen or I've heard, it's actually because the person really relies on their wage to live, and not to have that wage coming in every Friday would actually do more damage to the individual in terms of getting behind bills, and, mental health and all that kind of stuff kicks in. So if you can find something that is relative to their competency, that they can actually, produce results for you, whether it's admin or whether it's, reviewing stuff or whatever that might be, that you think is suitable for that person in that capacity that they have, without causing them a further injury to the existing injury, that's a good thing. But, and I've seen cases where employers have said, no, we're not paying you for your time off. Like, your time off is your time off. And what I've seen is that it's turned the relationship sour between the worker and the employer, that the worker kind of went, well, F you, you've shown me that you're not going to back me in a time of need, for example. But the employer is kind of going, well, look, I can't actually do this because it's not really the right thing to do, according to, I don't have anywhere else to put you, because, all I have is admin work and you're not an admin. So therefore, look, I don't have time in lieu for you. So I'm sorry, I can't pay you. And next thing is, okay, fair enough. I'm going to put in the mother of all claims against you to get as much money from this as possible. So, I'll see you in court.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad, but it sounds like the legal reality that a lot of organisations are facing. I know that in most of Australia, if not all of Australia, there's workers' compensation legislation that would prevent that from happening. Whatever the injury, whatever the circumstances, the worker is getting paid by default, and then the employer needs to basically prove why they shouldn't get paid rather than the other way around.
Yeah, so I think if you talk to most legal experts, they'll always say to you, the first rule is, can we get them into a room and sort it out before going into court?
No one wants to go to court. It's just expensive. It's stressful. There's almost always sometimes, there's always a some sort of settlement that can be come to, but ideally you just wouldn't get to that point in the beginning. I think if you're open and honest and say, look, I'd love to have you, keep you engaged and keep you connected with your work, and I understand your financial difficulties. Just having that conversation and say, well, what can we do? Maybe it's not with our organisation. Maybe you're doing alternate duties at another organisation. I'm not sure how the laws work in your jurisdiction, but it's worth just having an open and honest conversation, I think.
What's your views on sacking people following something that they've done that would be seen as stupid or not safe for themselves or for the people around them?
I think people need to be held to account for making decisions that clearly go against, safe practice or company practice. But I would hesitate to finish at that point. I would really be keen to understand, why did you make that decision? What was going on? And, if our carpenter, going back to that example, he clearly wasn't following the right way of doing things. Well, why not? Did he not understand them? Or did he understand them and they were just wrong? Were our procedures wrong? Was something going on at home for him? And even if he was, deliberately maligned and intentional with his actions and really wanted to do some damage, you'd have to ask, well, how is it that we came to put someone in that role who was thinking that way? Maybe there's something wrong with the way we manage people or our recruitment. There's always a deeper question to ask. And I think that's where, the learning starts to happen. So by all means, hold people accountable, but just recognize that you haven't, by sacking that person, you haven't prevented the next person from doing something similar. So it's better to gain an understanding of what actually happened rather than just reacting to someone's actions.
Like I'm going to come at it from the employer point of view. You've just done something really stupid that's, and I get the whole, well, hold on a minute. You're the one that employed this person. So you have to take accountability for not doing a proper interview and proper due diligence on the individual before taking them on. But at the same time, if they're a risk to the business and a risk to the employer, and now they've had an accident, it's a very sticky situation for the employer to be in the sense of, hold on a minute, if I sack him or her, they're going to go to court and there's going to be another court case on top of the court case for the injury. So it's going to be an unfair dismissal potentially on top of the injury case as well. So now it doubles up. Like, I feel for the employer in that regard. Like, I really do feel that it's stacked up against them, that they have to stomach the fact that they've now lost production because this person's not available anymore. They might have lost a bit of reputation with their client or with the main contractor because they're on the books for doing something stupid that one of their employees did that was stupid. So therefore, the brand and reputation is getting damaged. And through no fault of their own, other than they didn't see it coming themselves with the individual, they've now left themselves in a financially damaging position and a reputational damage position. And it's just a negative for the employer.
Yeah. It's important to hold people to account. And I would say that you would need some sort of HR process to manage that. Sacking people on the spot and exposing yourself to an unfair dismissal claim is definitely not ideal. There's probably a process that you can follow to reduce that legal risk and still hold someone to account. In some jurisdictions, I think you can, if it's sort of reckless conduct or gross, misconduct, you can dismiss someone instantly. But in other jurisdictions, you do need to follow a process. So it's careful. You need to be careful to understand that how the laws apply to you. But in each of these circumstances, there's an opportunity to learn. So I'm not saying don't hold people to account. By all means, do it. But take the opportunity to get something positive out of it and learn something from it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. But then to add to that, okay, fair enough. I'm not going to do the knee-jerk reaction because this guy done an absolutely stupid thing on the job today. So I'll hold court in terms of, I'll pay him or her for the next couple of weeks and see how things go. And I'll give them a phone call every week because I have nothing else for them, but just to see how they are, just to let them know that, their pay is still going to come through to them every week. Then it goes into 6 or 8 weeks and they're kind of going, hold on a minute here. How long more do I have to keep going at this? I'm down a man, I'm down a woman or whatever, and I'm 8 weeks into it now, and it was a sprained ankle initially, and now all of a sudden it's become ligament damage and mental health and stress. And, what do you say in terms of a method to deal with that for the listeners and the viewers?
It's a tricky situation, and each case is going to be a little bit different. So I call this injury management. So if your business has the ability to do some sort of injury management or have that sort of function, they should be engaged with the person and understand the injury and be talking to the doctors and talking to the insurers and understanding why the recovery is taking longer. If it started off as a sprained ankle and then now all of a sudden we're discovering ligament damage, has there been a subsequent injury? Has there been some other activity that's exacerbated the original injury? There's a lot of questions that throws up. But if you've lost someone for a couple of months and you're not getting that engagement, it's probably only going to get worse. I think if you're gonna try and engage with someone after they've had an injury and they're going to be sitting at home for a bit of time, you need to be with them from day one, probably within the first couple of hours, and just say, hey, we're here with you on this journey. Whatever the circumstances, we want to get you back up and running to where you were before. But if it's stretching out for 8 weeks and you're not getting that connection with that person, that engagement, it's only going to get worse. So something needs to happen. And again, it depends on the jurisdiction and what you're able to do within the confines of the law. But I would be asking those questions. Why is a sprained ankle taking 8 weeks? Yeah, I've had cases where it's a muscle strain and the person's still off work 12 months later. And you got to ask, how on earth is it taking that long to heal? I know that some muscle strains can take 3 to 6 months, maybe 12 months. No way. Either something's wrong, the treatment's wrong, the diagnosis is wrong, or there's been another injury or something else. There's something else we don't know about there.
But this is the thing. You see, the doctors are getting sued or afraid of getting sued so much that if you go to them with a back injury, they're going to say, yeah, how's your back? And you can't really measure a back pain because nobody can see or feel other than the victim themselves or the injured party themselves. And I'll give you an anecdote of something of a scenario that I knew of where he injured his back, came up from the site, went into the cabin, said, my back is in bits. And they said, what happened? He says, well, I don't know, jumped off a scaffold, or I don't know exactly the specifics of it, but my back is in bits. All right, okay. Will you be all right to carry on? I'll tell you what we could do. You can go on the ladder, or we can go and do another job down in another part of the site, and it'll be less aggressive on your back. Went back to site, done that other job, and then found that the back was actually getting worse. So I went back up to the cabin and said, look, lads, I actually physically can't work at all. I'm done. My back is really in bad shape. Sent them home, and a couple of weeks later, they got a solicitor's letter for 2 accidents involving the individual. So the solicitor, cute enough, turned around and said, well, the second time when they told you to go back to site, that's actually another injury. Yeah. And it went from, compensation for one accident doubled because of the individual, of the project manager, not doing it in a malicious way whatsoever, but just seeing, it might be a back injury, you might work it off, for the rest of the day. But just that decision. And of course, the doctors backed up the individual or the injured party who genuinely probably did have a back injury. But, between the doctors and the lawyers, the employer got stuffed.
Hello, Gaffers. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. We love
every one of the guests that we have. But in order to bring on more great guests, we'd love to build a channel with you. So hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and let's create a really great community where we bring in better and better guests for you to deliver great content and great pieces of information that you can take back into your business. Now, back to the podcast.
Yeah. I hear you, and I've heard similar stories. When I worked in law, I worked in workers' compensation litigation, and very much stories like that. It's important to draw a box around your area of expertise, and I don't want to pick on the project manager in that example, but they've effectively diagnosed, someone's come to them and said, I've got an injured back, and they've effectively diagnosed them by giving them an alternate duty, not knowing whether that's within their medical capacity to do that. I think if an injury gets reported to you, the first thing you should do is take it very seriously. And first of all, ask the person, do you need medical assistance? I think you do. I don't want to do it without your consent, but let's get you to a doctor. Let's get an opinion on this and see what we need to do. Now, I appreciate that doctors are overly cautious. They're worried about being sued and whatnot. Depending, again, on your jurisdiction, you might be able to ask for not just a medical certificate that says, Gavin's off work for 3 months, but something a bit more specific. You might be able to ask for, what's your clinical reasoning for this injury? What's the diagnosis, and what's your reasoning for linking it to the particular work activity that was being undertaken? And then also, potentially you could get a second opinion if things aren't quite adding up for you, which means sending them to another doctor. But then there's considerations on that. Typically you can't subject someone to a medical examination unless they consent. It's a very difficult thing to navigate. And I think if you're in that situation, you need legal help, specialist legal help. What I would say though is if someone reports an injury to you, take it seriously and don't try and diagnose it yourself and give the person alternate duties. That's a doctor's job.
Yeah, well said. Could you give us, close to wrapping up time, but could you give us maybe your top 5 things to do in the case of an accident, or, whatever you think is the first 3, 4, 5 steps any employer should take away from today in terms of dealing with accidents in the workplace? What your golden rules basically, Des?
I think if I was to give a handful of takeaways, I would say when you're looking at the set of circumstances that caused the incident and you're settling on someone not following a process or a procedure, just ask a little bit more. Just ask them why. Why did you not follow that procedure? Why did you not do the thing that you needed to do at that time? And try and understand that. I think if you're asking those types of questions, your understanding and your learning is going to be 100% better. You have to, doing an investigation into an incident like that is a navigation exercise, because you've got competing stakeholders demanding things of you. You've got the client organization or the principal contractor coming down on you. We want an investigation report within 2 weeks and this needs to happen. We've got to report it up to head office. I think it's setting the expectations and saying, look, we take this seriously. We want to get valuable learning and meaningful outcomes from this incident. So that's going to take time. And I can provide you with a report as to where we're at this point in time, but we actually want to see this through. And so asking further questions, seeing it through and managing those expectations of stakeholders. And also just recognizing that an organization, there might be some immediate things that you can do following an incident. So if, let's just say something, the wind blows something off the roof and it falls into the construction site, maybe it narrowly missed someone. The first thing you would do is, okay, let's get everything off the roof. It's too windy. We won't store anything up there. We'll secure everything. Then we'll find out what happened. And then you can do an inquiry into how this thing came to be up there and how it came to be blown off. And there might be some actions or improvements that you can make or learnings that follow that investigation. but you should be digging quite deep. And it sounds like it's an onerous task. It's not. It's digging deep. What I mean by that is just talking to people. Or better still, it's listening to people. It's sitting down with someone and having a conversation, just like we're talking now, and saying, "Hey, just tell me the story of what happened. What's going on? How did this happen? How did that happen? Just tell me. I'm listening."
Mm-hmm. Well said. I'm going to throw a few curveballs at you, Des, if you don't mind.
Okay.
If you listen to the show,
It is very early in the morning here, so be kind.
By the way, for anyone watching or listening, it's we started at 5 o'clock his time, or around 5:10 in the morning, Des' time. So, have to say you're a bright button for 5 o'clock in the morning. Knowing what you know now, Des, what would you do different in your life?
That is a curveball question. One thing that served me really well is not waiting for other people to further my career. I've made deliberate decisions to do it myself. So if there's a training course that's available for free, I put my hand up for it. If there's an opportunity to formalize my experience or education in any way, I take it. And I don't wait for someone else to offer it to me or to bring it to me. I go and get it. I enroll myself. I pay for it myself. I take annual leave to do it. That's worked wonders for me.
Well done. Well done. Congratulations on that. Well said. Something of interest of you that not many people would know. Told you there were curveballs. Something that is about you that I wouldn't know, or the listeners wouldn't know.
I probably sound like a bit of a bookworm, a bit of a nerd with the way I carry on with law and all that and safety. But really, I love working on the front line. I loved my time on a forklift, and I love sort of the long hours and the hard work. There's something about that gives you purpose, and I enjoy it.
Wow. I can see when you said that the passion is still there as well within you. Maybe you need to tap into that at another chapter of your life, your career. Could you name a place, your go-to place, in terms of wherever it is in the world that you go, do you know what, that's my sanctuary?
This one's a little bit easier for me to answer. I'm quite lucky that I have a deep interest in photography. I just do it for my own purposes, and I love history. So I love my ideal circumstance is me going around photographing historical things. But anytime I'm holding my camera and looking through the viewfinder, that's my happy place. And that's happy place in the sense that that's my place of calm and focus. And the cover of the book has an image that I took on one of our construction sites. So I think a place of calm, place of focus is looking through my camera wherever I am.
Des, how do people get in touch with you? Talk to me. We're going to put a link to the book in the show notes, obviously. But if people want to reach out to you and just have a chat, maybe talk to you about, their own systems in terms of accident investigation and how, maybe it could be improved, or are you open for people to reach out to you? Talk to us about that.
More than happy to. Best place to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn, and with a name like Desai Link, I should be relatively easy to find, I would have thought. But hit me up there. You can send me a message, write a post. I'd encourage you to reach out.
Des, thank you very much for joining the show. You've been an absolute expert on the subject, and I like the fact that you've niched into one particular topic of safety, as opposed to being a broad book on safety. It's nice to see that, because I see a lot of safety books that are too broad in the spectrum, and you've drilled into one particular topic that's a very important topic for everybody. And we could have talked another half an hour in terms of accident investigation, but your insights were very, very helpful, and hopefully people will take some really good nuggets of information away from today's podcast. Des, we wish you all the very best, and we wish you the best with the book as well. Just in case, in the sense of the book, is it on Amazon as well, or?
It is on Amazon, and I think it's pan-regional, so if UK, Australia, it shouldn't matter. It will be available there. And if you're connected with an educational institution, they should also be able to order it in for you as well.
Brilliant. Take care, Des. We wish you all the very best.
Been a great pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.